Good afternoon. Hello, hello. Taking advantage of a day off. Going to jump in and get started. Today, going to build a full stack Next.js app using the latest version of Next, Prisma, Postgres, vercel, and going to add authentication via better auth. They've recently, from what I've seen, taken over for what I normally would use, auth.js. So I figured, why not migrate over and start using better auth? And I'm not going to worry about migrating any existing applications. I'm just going to start with a brand new and fresh from scratch. And from what I read in the documentation, it seems to be pretty straightforward and easy to kind of set up. So I think today I'll focus on just doing, yes, we do. Just doing the Google OAuth provider, maybe with the Prisma adapter. And then in the next video tomorrow, I may add in the email and password. And then the following day, or maybe the same day, depending on the time, I'll add email verification so that it sends the email two-step email authentication. So you enter your email, it'll send the email verification. You'll click on the link, and from there you'll be able to log in once you've confirmed the link, and we'll grab your, I think we're using sessions with these. If not, it'll be cookies, but whatever it is using, we'll read the docs and set it up. But for today, we're just going to establish the application, clean it up a little bit, connect it to Postgres database using Prisma, and then we will add in Google OAuth via better auth. So with that said, I think we are going to go ahead and jump in and get started. It's been a while since I've built the next app. I won't say a while, but maybe a few weeks. I've been using or building a lot of Expo apps here lately, since that's kind of the next thing that is on my plate for someone that I know. So just wanted to get familiar with it. And I had never used Expo. I was doing some research to see how could I provide a website and app, mobile app for my client, and stumble across Expo and kind of fell in love with it, so to speak, if you will, because of how easy it is to use and its flexibility and some of the built-ins that it already has. It makes life a lot easier when you're coding. So I am going to take a break from it for right now, and I'll come back to that later on this evening. But let's just go ahead and get this app going. Hey, how's it going, my friend? Can you hear anything now? Let me know if you can hear me now. My apologies. I was getting everything set up, and I'm thinking that's what you may be referring to, but you should be able to hear me now. Everything looks good on the OBS side, but if you can't, let me know. All right. So according to the documentation, if you can't hear me, let me know in the chat. Let's jump in and get started. So this is showing the latest version. Yep, yep, yep. But we want the command. I'm pretty sure it's the same, but let's just make sure. Okay, let's go to get started. Installation. Okay, appreciate it. Thank you so much for confirming. I hate to be talking to myself and no one can hear me that wants to hear me. um, but in the terminal, we'll use the at latest command. Let's copy that now. And I'm using npm. Head to the terminal. Let's see if it will. latest, and I'm just going to remove my app because I'm going to install it in the current directory. Excuse me. And we're going to use the defaults with TypeScript, ESLint, Tailwind, the app router, and the turbo pack. And just give it a few minutes to finish the installation. Hey, what's going on, my friend? Long time no speak to. Thanks for the continued support per usual. But I hope you're doing well. This is still going. Give it a few more minutes here to get started. But if anybody has any experience with Better Off, I'd love to hear your experiences with it or your take on it. For everything I've read, it seems to be pretty straightforward and the app is successfully installed. Let's do a little bit of cleanup first. For everything I read, it is pretty straightforward and works very similar to auth.js. So we'll start by cleaning up the root of the project, the home layout, and just replace the div with the new div, and I'll add home page to give it some text. We'll remove the image import because we currently aren't using it. And then back in the terminal, I'm just going to remove the boiler and set the body, the HTML, the root, and the app. We'll give the height to 100%. The width will be 100%. We'll set the overflow on the X to be hidden. And we'll go at apply text small just to distinguish the text size. Yep, and we'll click save. And I will just run the application. Oh, I forgot the colon there. We'll just run the application just to make sure that it is working properly. Head back to the terminal and type the command npm run dev. Press enter, and this should get it going on localhost 3000. So let's check it out. And there we go. Make sure this global took. I'm sure it did, but let's just make sure. Set the text size to medium. Actually, I don't need this. Let me remove this. There. Uh-oh. Close this. Let's see something. Add apply text small. There. Okay. Did I misspell apply a minute ago or something? Let me see. APPLY. Not sure why it's giving me that error message, but we'll just go back. Text small. There. All right. So we are ready to kick things off and get started. So I think the first thing we'll need to do is install Prisma. And it is slightly different than what it used to be to set up Prisma. I just did a video for those that may not be aware, but it requires a few different installation configurations than before. So nothing overly complicated, but just slightly different. Excuse me. So in the in Google, I just typed in Prisma Next.js, and it should take us to. This is the maybe it is the second one. Yeah, this is it. So we're going to follow this from the documentation to install Prisma. And we're using Prisma as the ORM, and we're connecting this to a Postgres database. Once we have Prisma set up and installed, we'll then layer in better auth, add in the Google OAuth, and make sure that we can persist the user in the database via the Prisma adapter. So for right now, I'm just going to stop the server, hit clear, and we're going to type in npm install Prisma TSX as suggested. We'll just copy to highlight it. Uh-oh. I tell you what, we'll just type it out. It's that npm install Prisma TSX dash dash save dash dev and press enter. And we'll just give that a moment or two to finish installing it. And then we're going to install the Prisma extension, accelerate, the client, and .env. So we'll add that now. Clear that out. Paste this in. Okay, there we go. And hit enter. And then once installed, we'll need to initialize Prisma in the project. And we'll copy this command exactly as it is typed here in the docs to initialize Prisma. So we'll go ahead and set that up now. Npm install init dash dash db dash dash output, and it's going to create a directory generated within the app directory with Prisma inside of it. So let's just go ahead and do that now. And this will also add the Prisma directory with a schema.prisma file, which will hold the database data source in addition to the file that we'll use to store the models that will organize our data in the database. So we're doing that now. So it's saying let's set up our Prisma database. And we got a few questions to answer. So we'll select the region, and that's going to be US East 1. That's the closest one to me. But if you're following along, be sure to select the one that's closest to you. We need to name the project. I'm just going to name it auth app, and just give it a moment to finish creating the project. I appreciate everyone stopping by. Hope everyone's having a good day today. And let's finish still set up the database. And it is saying that it's set up. We've created an initial schema.prisma file and a .env file with the database URL. And we're going to use, as I mentioned, vercel Postgres to persist our data or to store the data. So we'll set that up next. But just to kind of go through what just took place, this is the response back from Prisma indicating what instructions on what we need to do in order to establish the backend or the database for our full stack app. So we'll define our database schema in the schema.prisma file, check the documents for inspiration, and we'll go through that if need be. We'll need to apply migrations using npx prisma migrate dev, but that is also in the docs. But if not, we'll come back to this command. We can then manage our data inside of npx prisma studio, which is a lightweight interface provided by Prisma that allows us to manage the data in the database without having to use the actual database itself. You know, the database typically isn't the most user friendly as it relates to being able to update, create, and just read the data that's inside of it. But with this interface, it makes it a lot easier. So we're certainly going to take advantage of that. And then we can send queries from the app using JavaScript or TypeScript. And of course, we're using TypeScript in the project. Here are some instructions in the event that we need it. I wonder what these instructions look like. I don't recall using these before. Well, excuse me, I don't recall clicking on this link. I'm not going to say I didn't use the instructions because certainly I used the instructions for at some point. Okay, so this page provides a step-by-step guide for Prisma Postgres after setting up the Prisma init. Set up the TypeScript app with the Prisma ORM, migrate the schema of your database, and query the database for TypeScript. Okay, so just kind of explaining everything that we have access to once we've done the Prisma init, so that's great. Logged into the Prisma data platform, new Postgres instance, organize the project directory, and it's just giving instructions on what we can do in order to gain access to the project. Okay, so some good details there, and I'm sure as we continue to read on, it should talk about querying and mutating data. Yeah, there it is. So this is what we would do. This is the function, and this is how we would create a user if we were to use this approach. But we're going to use the Prisma adapter inside of Better Off, so we don't have to worry about manually writing this code. The adapter is going to take care of the heavy lifting for us, if you will. But in the event you're not using the adapter, but you're still using Prisma, you want a little more control, then you will follow those instructions. But for us, we've already cared for that, so we don't necessarily have to worry about it. So we've answered the questions that it suggested, and the Prisma init command created a Prisma directory with a schema.prisma file, and we'll close this for now. Just to check, here is the schema.prisma file inside of the Prisma directory, a prisma.config.ts file for configuring Prisma. So let's check that out. That is in the root of the project as well. And this is the prisma.config.ts file. And here is the information that is within this file configuration. A Prisma Postgres database. That is going to be what we have access to, but we're not going to use it to store our data. Like I said, we're going to use vercel, and we'll update the database URL, but you do have this option locally on your computer as long as you have SQL installed on your computer. A .env file containing the database URL, we have that here, and there's the database URL inside of the .env file. An output directory for the generated Prisma client as app/generated/Prisma. So if we go to the app directory, I don't see the generated file by Prisma, so I may need to rerun that command because I thought it gave that directory, but that's okay. If it's not there, we'll rerun it and problem solve it if we run into an issue with it, but I think we should be good to go. So the next step is to define the Prisma schema, and instead of following this command, I'm actually going to use Better Off to kind of help with that. But before we add Better Off, let's just go ahead and set up our database. And as I mentioned, I'll be using vercel. This is a very important step. However, if you were to use a different database provider, you're more than welcome to do that. It worked just fine. The main thing will be you'll just need to update the .env file with the new data source that you're using if you're not using this exact same approach, if you will. But other than that, like if you were using MongoDB, you'll need to update it from from Postgres to MongoDB. Or if you're using a different backend other than vercel, you'll need to make sure that you store that database URL or all of the connection strings associated with it within the .env file so that your application has the appropriate access to your backend. But with that said, let's go ahead and add a database, and I think I need to adjust this window size in order to click on it. Yep. So for context, I'm on the vercel.com website. I'm a frequent user, so I'm already logged in. But if you aren't currently logged in, all you need to do is go to vercel.com. It is free to sign up for an account. Once you're signed up, you should be able to see the different options available inside of Vercel. But for us, and you can do this with the free tier if you currently aren't paying for a subscription or for additional instances of Prisma or instances of Vercel. But once you're logged in, you'll be redirected to your workspace overview. I have a workspace named My Team. And then from there, you'll just click on storage. And if you have any prior applications, those or databases, those are going to be listed here. Of course, I have quite a few. So from there, we'll click on storage, and we're going to use the Neon serverless Postgres. We'll then click continue. We'll be asked to select the region that's closest to us, so just be sure to do so. And as I mentioned, this is going to be a free tier, and it kind of talks about the storage available for the project, which is one of the reasons why I like to build locally first, then connect it to a database to kind of resolve or to kind of minimize some of the expense associated with these cloud databases. But anyway, go ahead and click on continue. After that, you'll need to name the application. And I'm just going to name this My Better Off app. Then we'll click create. Just takes a moment or two to set up your individual database, and you'll get the notification back that the database is created successfully. Then we'll just click done, and we'll be redirected to the application that we just created overview inside of the settings, which gives us access to some of the sensitive data that we'll need to use or to store within our app in order to gain access to this database. So under the .env.local file, let's just click on copy snippet. And for whatever reason, we always get every time I click it the first time, I always get the failed message, but it's all good. Just go back and click it again and make sure you're getting the check mark. I'm going to reduce the size of this window, and we'll head back to VS Code. And inside of the .env file, I'm just going to highlight everything within this file, delete it, and paste in what I just copied from Vercel. And this is sensitive information that you want to make sure you keep secure. And if you're uploading this to GitHub, you don't want to include this, as if you did, someone to have access to your sensitive information that can be used to access your database, and that can create all sorts of trouble. So just kind of make sure that if you're adding this to GitHub, you ignore the .env file, and usually it comes done automatically, but not a bad idea to make sure that you do so yourself. Hey, what's going on? How you doing? Absolutely. I appreciate you stopping by. Yep. Yeah, it's been a while. Had a few days off, did a little bit of traveling for work, but we are back at it now. We are back at it now. All right. So with that, we're at a point now where the next steps would be to add the Prisma function. No, I'm sorry. The next steps will be to update our schema. And instead of updating the schema, I'm gonna leverage Better Off to kind of help us with that. But so we'll skip that step for right now. And then the next thing is to add the .env to the prisma.config.ts file. So inside of the file suggested, at the top, we're going to just import .env/config, and I'll paste it in at the top of this file. Yep, and that's exactly what we want. This is to get access to the variables in the .env file. They can either be loaded by your runtime or by using .env. Include an import for .env at the top of the prisma.config.ts file. So that's what we just did. And we'll continue to scroll down. And the next step, I'm sorry, is to seed the database. I'm not going to worry about seeding the database with anything right now, not for this tutorial or this walkthrough. Once we add the schema, we would then need to migrate the changes. And this command is going to create the database tables and generate the Prisma client, but we're not ready to do that just yet. And we're not going to seed any data. So we'll continue to scroll down in the documentation and we're going to set up the Prisma client. So now that you have a database and some initial data, you can set up the Prisma client and connect it to your database. At the root of the project, create a directory named lib and a file named prisma.ts. And here's the command in order to do that if you were using the terminal, or you can actually do it from VS Code, but I'm just going to leverage some of the shortcuts that it has within the editor. So in the root of the project, as it mentioned, let's create a directory named lib, and inside of it, a file named prisma.ts. We'll just copy this information exactly as it is written. Is there not a, there it is. Let's say, is that a copy button? We'll paste it in. And then we'll need to update this as it can't find this module. So let's just go at, we'll remove this, slash app slash, yeah, see, it doesn't have the generated client there. So let me run this command again. Go back in the terminal. Paste this in. There. Press enter. We'll just give it a moment. Yep. It's the appropriate. My better auth app. Let's try this again. Okay, so it's not capturing that, but why aren't you at slash app? You know what? I gotta migrate the changes first. That's right. So let's just close this out for right now. We'll click save and come back to it. Let's go ahead and set up better off. And we won't need this vercel page anymore, so I'll use it and just go to better off. Out a little bit more. As a matter of fact, I tell you what, let me change this view. Boost that back down. There we go. And from the better off documentation, we'll click on docs. So if you aren't familiar with better off, it's a framework agnostic universal authentication and authorization framework for TypeScript. Provides a comprehensive set of features out of the box and includes plugin ecosystem that simplifies adding advanced functionalities, whether you need two-factor authentication, passkey, multi-tenants, multi-session support, or even enterprise features like SSO, creating your own IDP. It lets you focus on building your application instead of reinventing the wheel. Love it. Off to a great start just by the introduction there. So as we scroll down the application, there should be, oh, and even has rate limiter built in. Nice. Let me see. Is there an installation or get started? Let's try that. Installation. Okay, here we go. So to install the package, let's start by adding better off to the project. And we'll just click this command and paste it into the terminal. Add to the terminal. I'm gonna keep this one. Actually, we'll close this one out. This is the one we want to hold on to. Yep. And inside of this, we'll paste in this command npm I better off. So this is just installing the better off package inside of our app. And just to confirm that it is working, and my apologies for not checking not checking the version number of our app. If we go to the package.json, which is kind of like the heartbeat of the app, or the brains, if you will, it tells us quite a bit of information. So we have Prisma installed. We have Better Off installed versions 1.3.34. We have Next at version 16.0.1. Tailwind, all of that good stuff is added. So perfect. Excuse me. Next, we'll need to set environment variables. We'll create a .env file in the root of the project and add the following environment variable keys. So we'll need to add the secret key. This is a random value used by the library for encryption and generating hashes. You could generate one using the button below, or you can use something else like OpenSSL. Nice, okay. So all we gotta do is copy this, and apparently we get a secret key to go along with it. So we'll click on .env. I'll paste this in. And then when it's going to click generate the key, generate the key for me. I probably can just remove this. Yep. And then I'll just save this. All right. So we'll minimize this. And then next, create a better off instance. Create a file named auth.ts in one of the three locations. I'm gonna add it inside of the lib folder since I already have one. So we'll add a file named auth.ts. You can also nest any of these folders under source, app, or server. And this is what it'll look like. The source will be src lib, then auth.ts, app lib, auth.ts. So this is pretty cool because we will use source directory. I've been playing with TRPC here a little bit lately. I actually like it. I like the type safety that it gives, and some of the querying functionality that it gives as well. So in the upcoming days or so, I'm going to build a project using it. So it's good to see that we can use the SRC directory, which I didn't think it would be an issue, but it's good to just see that it's not. Adding this file, import better off and create your auth instance. Make sure to export the auth instance with the variable name auth or as a default export. So I'm just going to copy this as listed. And as it appears from the docs, this is the file where we'll kind of configure cancels. This is the file where we will configure our authentication options like social login or email password or multi-factor authentication, whatever it is. So this will, I guess this is kind of like the brains or the hub for the authentication of the project. So that's good to know. Then we'll need to configure the database. Better Off requires a database to store your user data. You can easily configure Better Off to use SQLite, Postgres, MySQL, or more. So this is what that looks like. Alternatively, if you prefer to use an ORM, which we are, you can use one of the built-in adapters. And we're going to use Prisma. So if I click on it, this is what it looks like to bring in Prisma. So I'm just going to copy this, remove that, paste this in. And for that Prisma client, so I wonder if it is looking for the generated Prisma file or if it is looking for the actual function itself. I would assume it's looking for the function and not necessarily the adapter, but I could be wrong. So let me see something. Let me see. We haven't made any migrations just yet, so this may not work. So it should be /app/ yeah, it's not there just yet. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and create tables, but we do need to change this to Postgres. So let's copy this, remove the SQL, paste it in, and replace it with Postgres. So let's go ahead and run the next step, create the database tables. Better Off includes a CLI tool to help manage the schema required by the library. Generate this command generates an ORM schema. Okay, so this is cool. So we don't have to worry about copying the models or the schema. We could just run this command and it should generate it for us. So I'm gonna copy it, head into the terminal, paste in this command, npx better-off/CLI generate, press enter. Mm, Uh-oh, let's go back. No, we want Postgres. Let me close this out for a second. PostgresQL. ESQL. Enter. And then I think for this is my client. I'm just going to add this, hit enter. Let me see something. We may have to make migrations first, but let's just see. Go back and let's copy this command and see what we get. It's going, so it's saying not files. So let's go ahead and migrate. Let's just add a schema inside or a model inside of the schema.prisma file so we can generate the Prisma client. It looks like we won't be able to set this up without setting up the Prisma client. So I'm just going to copy the user and post as listed. We'll click, make sure we save it. And there should be, and then we're going to run npx prisma migrate dev to initialize this migration. So we'll just go copy it, go back to the terminal. Trash that. crazy. Maybe trash that too. Let's just paste in this command. Let's see what we get. Looks to be all right. So the database is in sync. So let's check it by running the Prisma Studio that it mentioned earlier. And I'm pretty sure that it is npx Prisma Studio. Yep, there it is. So we'll copy this, paste this in, and this is just going to give us a light interface from Prisma so we don't have to leverage the vercel Postgres Neon database just to see what our schema looks like, what the tables look like, I should say. Just a easier way to see it, and it launches on localhost 555. And as you can see, we have a post and user model, so that is great. Now let's go back to the lib directory, and let me see if it generated the app slash generated slash prisma now. So I'll go back to lib, and inside of it prisma.ts, and just go at slash app slash generated slash prisma, and I think client. Hit save, and we don't need that extra s. This is giving us the prisma function. Let's just read it from the doc so I don't have to explain it myself. Make it easy. It should have been up. Well, anywho, basically what this is giving us access, number one, to the Prisma client so that we can run Prisma throughout the application without having to type in the connection over and over and over. It also optimizes the connection to Prisma, meaning that if there's already a connection established, it's going to use it. And if there isn't one, it would establish one for us. This basically just makes using Prisma easier by giving us access to IntelliSense, gives us access to Prisma throughout the application, and also optimizes the connection to establish a connection if there isn't one. And if there is one, it'll just leverage what's already there. So this is perfect. Excuse me. All right, so we've cared for that. Now let's care for the auth.ts file, as it is looking for this as well. And I think all we need to do for this one is go at slash app, and then that cares for that. And then now we have access to the Prisma client inside of this, where we'll be using the Prisma adapter. So that's absolutely perfect. So I wonder if we can run this command now, although we have a model or a model already established in our schema.prisma file. So let's test it out. We'll go to the terminal and keep that running. We'll close this. Clear. And we'll run the command npx at better dash auth slash CLI generate. Hit enter. Let's see what we get. Already exists. Do you want to override it? Yes. That's pretty cool. Success. Better off schema has overwritten successfully. So let's close this or terminate that session. And before we run it, minimize that. Let's go to schema.prisma file inside of the Prisma directory and see what we got. So, wow, it did override it. So basically we have a user model with with some familiar fields. If you're coming from auth.js, you've seen these before, the field name, email, and and it captured post as well too, because we did create a model named post. Wants to know if we have the email verified, the image, which is optional, to create it, update it. It's capturing the session for us, which is cool, and the account. It kept our post model, so we'll still be able to create a post with a user. So that's great. And I love that it already gave us the relationship between, or maintain the relationship between the author and the post. So the user who's the author can have multiple posts. And then it has the standard session model with all of the appropriate information there so that we can capture the token, potentially the IP address, etc. And it has the relation here so that if the user gets deleted, the session gets deleted along with it. And we also have the model name account, which is just capturing the appropriate account information and verification model as well. So perfect. Yeah, that's pretty cool. We don't even need to do anything with it. So this command creates the required tables in the database. So let's see. Let's run this command and see what happens, and then we'll run we'll run npx Prisma Studio. So we'll go to the terminal again. I'm just going to paste in this command. I'm not sure if I need to do this one or the Prisma command, but let's see. Nothing make a failure but a try. Only works with built-in KSL data, and it probably says that, yep, this only works by so that explains that. So we just made some changes, and there should be a migrate dev. Actually, yeah, we should just better run the migrate dev command, and that should give us the ability to see the new models in our database. So is the command still there? That's okay. We should better hit up and get back to it. Nope, it's not. So let's find it. Mm-mm. 1 second. I know it's in here somewhere. If it was a snake, it'd probably reach out and bite me. Here we go. Let's grab this, paste it in, hit enter. Parsing, the relationship type username model is not matching. Session is not matching. Hmm. You know what? Let me change this name from init to user. No, better off. Nope. So let me drop. Let's go model changes. Migrations. Yep. Yep. Where's the command? I just want the command. Mm, parsing attribute that related to type field user ID and the model account is not matching the reference field ID. I'm pretty sure this is because I need to drop the current and update it. Let me see. I know that there has to be in here somewhere. Let me try bxdb push. prisma db push. All right, so it really doesn't like this relationship. So what did it do? Which relationship did it not like? Relationship type user ID session. Yeah. Is not matching the user session. Is not matching the user ID versus ID. I wonder if that should be referencing the user ID because that is the name of the actual ID. No, that should be it because it's going to reference the ID of the actual user. No, so we're good there. Account user ID. That looks good. Cascade delete. Yep. And inside of the user, we have sessions. Yeah, that looks good. ID is. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to change this to a string. Yeah, let's make the ID a string. Matter of fact, I'm going to make all of these IDs a string. Yep. String, yep. Yep. Let's try that out. That off. Let's try it now. Nope. It still doesn't like it. Let's see. What else are you looking for, my friend? Relationship reference and amount of user. Prisma schema validation, error, parsing, attribute, relation. The type of field, user ID, and amount of session is not matching. So I'm getting an error from the CLI that it generated, and it says user ID string. Yep. User ID. Yep, that looks good. ID string, auto incrementing it because we'll need to. This is the one coming from this. That looks good. You know what? Why don't I add this shouldn't matter. I'm not gonna worry about that right now. Title ID, author ID, relation to the user. The author ID is gonna reference the user. Yeah, that should be fine. Is it though? So I wonder if we back this down to, I tell you what, I'm going to remove this for right now, and I'm gonna come back and add it. Let me just get this updated first. Let's save this. Now let's run the command, and I'll come back and add it in just a moment. But process of elimination first. go ahead and run this command and see what we get. And we are still getting the error. Auto increment cannot be used on any field. That's a string, duh, that's right. So let's remove this. Add default ID, save it, head back to the terminal, remove that. Am I missing anything? That's the only issue. And we'll go back and go better off. Let's see what we get. Hey, no errors so far. Let's just make sure that we don't get anything. And if we don't, yeah, it says that it's in sync. So we should now have the schema updated inside of our database, and the schema it should be pointing to, or now look like I should say, is this schema. So let's type the command or go back to the terminal that has the npx prisma studio that we stopped earlier. Let's just go ahead and restart it. And now it has a user, session, account, and verification. Perfect. So let's go ahead now and add in the actual authentication provider. And we're going to be using Google, as I mentioned. We'll close this out. Let's go back to the documentation. Authentication methods. Configure the authentication method you want to use. Better Off comes with built-in support for email, password, and social login. So I'm gonna test out this email password tomorrow, but I'm interested. But let's just go ahead and use social login for right now, or Google, I should say. So looks like you just go social providers and then just bring it in as a string. And then we'll need to create a client instance. So let's create the client instance first. So inside of lib, let's just add in auth dash client.ts file. So lib auth, what is that? Auth dash client.ts. Press enter. And for this, if you're using, hold on, let me read this. Import the client auth. If you're using your framework, create the auth package for your framework. Better off from React auto function to create your client, the base URL. Okay. So that I think is pretty straightforward. But I wonder, because we're using Next, does it have any other unique expectations? So let's do this. I think for Next, we'll need to establish that we're using cookies for it. So we don't want an emoji. We'll go import import. Let's import create auth client. Yep. We're going to bring in next cookies, and that should be coming from better-off/nextjs. And then we'll just go export const auth client. It's going to be equal to create auth client. The plugin that we'll be using is next auth cookies to kind of help manage it. So that's perfect. And hey, we don't need all of this. So we'll let Next kind of use some built-in Next features to handle the cookie management of this versus us trying to create something separate and set it up ourselves. This just makes life that much easier. So, okay. All right. And I think next, what was back in the docs? I know we'll need, that's it. Okay, so I know now. And then, hold on. Shouldn't there be a catch-all route somewhere that I think we need to add? Okay, let's do this. Let's go to add in our authentication method, and we're going to use social. And we'll be using Google. So I know we need to go to the Google console, and then we'll need to bring in the social providers. So I'm going to copy this, and this is going to go in the auth.ts file. So in the root, inside of lib, we'll go back to auth.ts. I'm just going to paste this in right here. Do we need as string? I don't think we do. I know the docs says it, but I'm just going to remove this. But I will add a explanation mark at the end just to make sure. I'm gonna remove this as well. Then we'll need to store these variables or the connection string to these variables inside of .env. So instead of copying this for consistency, or retyping it in, I should say, I'm going to copy it, excuse me, and paste it inside of .env. That's the client ID. And the next up, we'll need to do the client secret. And I'm just going to keep the naming convention exactly as it is listed here. All right, and we'll need to add the secrets into this environment variable file, and that will be coming from our Google console. What else do we have here? Signing in Google when you use the single.social function provided by the client and sign-in function. So we don't need to worry about that right now. I'm actually going to store this in a separate file. And if we want to use Google with the ID token, but I'm not going to. But you have access to additional scope. So that's pretty cool. All right, so yeah, that's pretty much it. So let's go to the Google console. So in a new tab, just go to Google and then Google console. I already have a console set up, but you'll basically just log in. It's free to create an account, and you'll create a project. I'm just going to reuse a current project that I already have versus reinventing another one. I have quite a few, as you've seen listed there. But once you're in, and if you need help with walking through on how to set it up, I actually have a video on it and I can include it. But we'll just go to API and then credentials. And if you're setting one up for the first time, the main thing that you want to do is be sure to set the callback URL so that it knows where to do the callback to. And that should be in this better off file, I would assume. Yep, right here. In the console, credentials, authorized redirect URLs, make sure you set the redirects to this. And for production, you'll just replace the local host with the production URL. So it basically has it listed right there. But if you need or want to walk through, I can definitely provide a video on that. But here, the authorized redirects. The authorized JavaScript origin is going to be localhost without the slash. And it'll give you an error if you try to do it. First, you'll name the application. I just named it Web Client 1 just to keep it simple. Then it'll ask you about the authorized JavaScript origins, and that's just going to be localhost 3000. And then the authorized redirect URLs, as it was referencing right here, you're just going to include localhost 3000. You can basically just copy it directly, but it's going to be /API/auth/callback/Google. And then the second one is going to be localhost 3000 with the slash at the end. You'll click save, but I'm not going to click save just yet because while I'm here, I want to capture the client secrets. So I'm just going to copy it from that view and paste it into my env file. And then the next bit of information that I will need is the Google client ID. So let me grab that now. Just copy the ID, paste that in, be sure to save it. So now technically that should be it based on the documentation as to all that we'll need to make sure that it actually works. So let's go ahead and fire up the server or our app on the local host. Don't worry about that, we'll keep that open. I'll close this one and we'll just go back with the one. Go npm run dev and give it just a moment to launch on local host. It's coming up now. Give it another second or two. Let's go to localhost 3000. We shouldn't need that anymore. All right. So let's go ahead and bring in our authentication to confirm that everything is working. Hold on, some be sure to save this. There we go. So instead of storing the session provider and all that information in the main app file, I'm going to create a separate directory that'll basically have a login and log out button. But I did not add a catch-all route that I know I need, but I don't recall seeing it. So let me just go back to the docs, and I'm sure I overlooked it. I'm sure it's there. So let's go back to the documentation, and there should be. Clients. Let's go basic usage. Maybe it's on a different screen. Social. Huh. There should be a catch-all route that allows us to send this data to the endpoint API. Here we go. Well, maybe not. One second. I think it is. I think it's API slash auth. here it is, mount handler there. And let's select Next.js. So need to make sure we add the mount handler so that to handle the API request, we'll need to set up a route handler on the server. Create a new file or route in the framework's designated catch-all route handler. This route should handle requests for the path API/auth and then whatever else is after that. So we're using Next.js, and this is the suggested path that we need to add to our app directory. So inside the app, I'm just going to add a folder and paste in the command that I just copied, /API/auth/all, which has 3 dots in front of it, and the dots in all are enclosed in curly braces. If you press enter, that'll basically save that folder structure. And we're going to add a file named route.ts. And then we'll just copy this, paste it in, and yep, that's the same path, and it's using to Next.js handler. Perfect. All right, so now let's begin to set up the authentication into the application and make sure that it persists inside of the database. So inside of the app directory, inside of page.tsx, we'll need to update this file for right now. Let's go ahead and bring in the auth, and that should be coming from at /lib/ this is going to be /auth. I also want to get access to headers, and that should be coming from next headers. It's part of the authentication flow. This is going to be ran on the server, so we're going to make this function asynchronous. Inside of it, let's create a const named session and set it equal to await auth dot API, dot get session. In the session, we want to capture it from the headers, and we'll just go await headers and be sure to call it. Click save. This is the technique that we need to use. We need to get access to the session headers based upon how better off leverages the headers. And this is why we brought in the next cookie, so that we can use the next cookie in order to store this information so that we can gain access to it and use it throughout the project. So then I want to establish a user. So we'll say const user is equal to session, because with a question mark, because we may not have one, dot user. And all I want to do is remove this home page and say, if there's no user, I want to show login. And if there is a user, I just want to show, what I want to show. I want to show the user that's logged in. I know that. And why are you giving me an error? Oh, this needs a question mark, because if there isn't a user, then we need to include the question mark to care for that. But in the p tag, I'm just going to show the user email, log in as, and then we'll say user dot email. Perfect. And I also want to show a log out button, log out. And we haven't created those components just yet, but we will in just a moment. So let's just make sure that we see login because we shouldn't have a session. If we go to localhost 3000, we see login. Perfect. And I'll add some styling just so we can see this a little better. Uh-oh. That should be a div. Give it a class name. We'll go padding of 6. That should be fine. Let's go text neutral 700 maybe. There. All right, so now let's create this login and logout components. So in the app directory, we're going to create a folder named underscore components. And the reason I added the underscore is so Next knows to ignore this as a route, almost like a route grouping, but this doesn't have any special routing capabilities or layout functionality. This just is a storage mechanism, if you will. And inside of this, I'm just going to add a file. Uh-oh, let me make sure you can see that a little better. And inside of it, I'm just going to add a file that's basically going to give us the ability to log in and log out with the user. And instead of separating, I'm just going to add it into one. So inside of components, I'm just going to add a folder named Google btn.tsx. This is going to have some interactivity with it. So we want to start with defining this. And because it has interactivity, it's going to be a client side file. So we'll start by setting this as use client. We'll need to bring in use state so we can identify the state of the user. I like to add loading animations and things like that to kind of enhance the user experience, if you will. We're going to bring in use router from next navigation. Not router. Okay. And then last but certainly not least, we'll need to bring in the auth client, and that should be coming from @lib/auth-client. Uh-oh. All right, so we're going to just, and this could have been separated, but I'm just going to add these into one file. And I'm gonna start with the sign in button first. Since we're signed out, I want to make sure that works. So I'm just gonna create an export, help if you add function, name sign in with Google button. And we'll go return. And just to make sure that it is working, I'm going to add a button, and we'll just name this log in with Google for right now. And I'm going to import it into the page.tsx and replace login with this button. So back in our page.tsx, we're going to import sign in with Google button. And I'll just remove the text of login. And we'll just bring in this component. And we see it is now updated on screen. So that is perfect. All right. And the next thing I want to do is go back to this file. And we're going to need a little bit of help in order to make this work. So the first thing is I want to capture the state of this process of logging in. So that's where use state comes in. We'll create a const and set it equal to use state. And of course, the initial state of this is going to be false because nothing is actually happening. And the the state variable is going to be named loading, and then we'll name the set loading, so that will give us the ability to manage the actual functionality. Let's create a const name on login and set it equal to async, because we'll need to wait on something to happen. And this is going to be a function. We'll have a try catch block inside of the function, and we'll set the loading state to true, because we know once we began the login process, we want to say, hey, we're in the process of loading now. And then we'll go await off client dot sign in, and we're signing in with social. So SOCIAL. The social provider is going to be the provider is going to be Google. And this is directly from the documentation. I just figured it'd be easier if I just showed you what to do from there. Eventually, we'll change the redirect to a different route other than it being the home route. But for right now, that's perfectly fine. And then inside of the catch portion of the try catch block, I'm just going to add console.log. And we'll go error signing in. And I like to see that error, so we'll go plus mark, then the error. And in this catch, will also say set loading. We want that to be false. So a little more work involved with the login portion, but I mean, you're talking one line of code, so, or two lines maybe, so no big deal at all. So now inside of the return statement, we want to get access to this login function that we just created, or on login, I should say. And we want that process to begin once we click. So we'll go on click. We'll pass in the on login function. We'll say disabled for loading. We'll give this a class name of, we'll go padding on the X of 4, padding on the Y of 2. I'll set the background color to, for right now, let's just make it blue 600. Set the text to white. Can I don't like that bright blue. Let's go neutral 600. There we go. And we'll set the corners to rounded large. And make the font medium, MEDIUM. And we'll go disabled. When it is disabled, we want the opacity to be 50. And on hover, we'll put the background to neutral 700. Click save. Perfect. All right. And then inside of this, I'm just going to remove, actually, I'll copy this because we can use the same thing. And we'll just, let me cut it. For the inside of the button, I want to have a little bit of JavaScript. So if it is loading, we'll say, let me add this. If it is loading, we'll just say 1 moment. There. Okay, so let's test this out. If it works, we should get redirected to the sign in, Google sign in screen, select the user. All goes well. We should then see log out and signed in as the user.email. And we'll check our Prisma Studio just to confirm that the user is persisting in the database. So let's check it out now. Excuse me. Click log in. One moment, that looks good. We're getting connected. We see the opacity change, perfect. Logging in with the JA dab. And if you haven't subscribed yet, look, go ahead and subscribe and support your friend, man. I appreciate it. We logged in, and as you can see, we are logged in as the JA dad in the Prisma Studio. I think this is the right one. Let's just refresh it. And as you can see, we now have one user, one session, one account. We see the JA dad listed there. So perfect. Now let's work on this log out button so that once we click log out, we are no longer logged in and all is well in the world. So we'll go back to the Google button. Let's create a export function name sign out button, and we'll return. This will be a button, and we'll just name it log out. Log out. Click save. Now let's import this in place of this log out button. At the top of this file, we'll go import sign out button, and be sure this coming from /_components Google BTN. And I'm just going to replace this log out text with sign out button. Click save. And then now you see it updated. Notice the text of it is a little different with this one. Now let's work on bringing this one to life. We'll add state variable for it as well. Use state, and we'll set the initial state to false. And we'll be naming this loading and set loading. We gain access to the router, but I don't need it right. Yeah, we'll go ahead and bring it in. I'm gonna go ahead and bring in the router, even though I'm not worried about the redirect just yet. Just want to go ahead and have it so that it'll be one less thing for me to potentially forget to include. Now we want to add the function that's going to communicate to the API for us to log out. So we'll just name this function on log out and set it equal to async because we need to wait on this request. We'll just add a little arrow function. This will be inside of a try catch block, just as we did with login. In the try portion, we'll start with set loading to true because we know we're waiting. So we want to change that state so we can show a different interface for the button and just kind of manage and see the process move along. And then up underneath it, we'll go await off client, and we want to gain access to sign out from the off client. With better off, we get access to fetch options. And we'll say on success. I missed the colon there. This should be an object. Fetch options is a object inside of sign out. And the reason I'm showing you this is because you can customize this to fit your project's needs based upon whatever you want it to do. Obviously, I'm staying on the same screen, so it's not as relevant. I don't necessarily have to have this, and I don't have to have two fetch options either, sorry. But we'll say on success. But if you were, let's just say on a dashboard window, gathering all the user's information, once you click log out, you would want to redirect that user to a different window so they no longer have access to the dashboard. This is where you would update that information. So if you are successfully logged out, you would say router dot push, and this is where you will redirect the user to whatever route. For this, I'm just going to send them back to the home page, and you can refresh the window because based on caching, it may not capture that the state just changed, or because you're changing the window, you'll want to make sure that you refresh that screen, because with Next.js, if you don't specify the caching, it can get a little tricky on what's actually being stored and what's being displayed and what shouldn't be. So this is just basically logging the user out, getting access to the sign out option, and then using the fetch options object to get access to on success. And if it's successful, we're redirecting user back to the home route. This can be modified based upon your project's needs, of course. And then inside of the catch, we'll go console.log. We're going to log error logging out. One of my favorite things to do is make sure I error handle, because you'll be amazed how many times you run into errors in development. And unless you specify what that error is, you may not be 100% sure on what's causing it. So I always like to make sure that I'm doing some form of error logging, whether it's using this or something else. Excuse me. It is a very good best practice. And as you put websites out on the web, users will find bugs because they're using your website more than you are in some instances. And you want to make sure that you're doing something to care for those errors. You may not use the console, of course, but you'll want to do something to care for errors. But anyway, after the console.log, be sure to include set the loading state to false at this point. And then inside of return statement, let's bring in that logic. We'll go on click so that we can get access to the on log out function that we just created. We'll set disable to loading, and we'll give this a class name for some styling of background color of, we'll just go neutral 600. Yep. Padding on the X of 4, on the Y of 2. Go rounded of, I think we did large. Yeah, large, and the font medium. Font set to medium, medium. Text color is white. And then I'll just say the disabled opacity is going to be 50. And we have our log out button right there. Last thing we'll do is test to make sure that this actually works, but I also want to update the state of the text. So if it is loading, I want to show something. And if it is at a rest state, we'll just continue to show log out. But if it's loading, we'll just say logging out. Click save. All right, so if this works, all that should happen is this text should go away. We should no longer see who's logged in, and we should only see the sign in button at that point. So we're just gonna click log out. And once I hit the button, we should see logging out text as well. And the opacity of this should be 50. So let's test it. Let me refresh this. Yep, we saw it temporarily. I'm gonna click log in with Google. We saw the state of the button change. We're logged in as the JA dad. Click log out. Bam. Now I'm gonna test it with this second account that I have listed here. And it's our first time logging in, so it's just showing that. And we see that there's a different user that's logged in. If we go to our Prisma Studio. Just refreshing the page. We now see we have 2 users stored within the database. So that means that it is working properly. So what we'll do next, because we've successfully integrated Better Off into the application, we'll work on adding the email and password option next to test that out. I don't think it requires any additional logic, but we'll read the docs and figure it out. And then we'll give the logged in user access to create, update, delete, post that they've created. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, look, consider giving me a like and subscribing. I appreciate the support. But we'll come back later on, and I'll probably work on a different project next. But this was pretty cool. This was pretty cool. Actually, let me see something. I may go ahead and grab it now. Let's see. Actually, you know what? We could go ahead and they have a minute or two where I could go ahead and update our schema to give it a post model so that if we want to create a post, we can do so with the logged in user. Now we'll come back and work on that one later. So if I don't work on that later on this evening, we'll work on it tomorrow. But I am going to jump back in later on tonight and a work on Expo a little bit. Want to go over some features with Expo and React Native. So we'll come back and do that later on this evening. But like I said, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to give me a like, consider subscribing, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.